it's simple in terms of what you need to do, but it's not easy to do it and do it consistently. A wise man once said to me, one of the greatest things about being in sales is there are hardly any challenges that calling 10 leads, emailing 10 leads, and texting 10 leads a day won't solve. What do you think about that?
I think of another wise man that's in our role play room named John Wetzel, who says prospecting will solve all your problems. So I think it's a similar alignment to that statement.
Alex, is it that easy? And why? No, is it? No, let me say, is it that simple? And why? And because I like to use the word simple and easy in different category.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Yes and no. So yes, from the standpoint of, I think, sometimes like cliches or simple quotes they're valuable and they're full of truth, yet they can be misinterpreted if they're just taken completely literally, right? So it's like, I called somebody, this is the literal, right? I called 10 people and said, hey, how you doing? Just wanted to see how things were going. Do you know anybody that wants to buy or sell real estate? That is not going to solve all your problems in sales, right? So like, I think, that's one of the things that we work on is, we're going through a whole thing right now with the team with accountability. It's 100 where, we want to get to 100 dials a day. There's and then it's like, depends on where the agent is at. Like we have new agents on the team that don't have a pipeline, right? And B, don't have great skills. So they've got to get their skills up by coming to role play, getting their skills up. And they've got to make more dials to get more reps. It's like when you're learning anything new, right? So I could kind of stop there, but it's true if your skills are good, which by the way, your skills can always get better. But if you have a high level of skills and you call and talk to 10 people a day with an efficacy of your calls, yes, like that will help a lot. Because I know agents out there that have been in the business for 7-8 years and have decent skills and have sold, 15 properties in a year, 12, 15 properties in a year. It's like, that means you can sell 30, 40 if you up, but they do that transaction treadmill thing where they, maybe get a lead from a Sphere or something like that. And they're just kind of going hand to mouth, but they're not really like making that effort to talk to 10 people a day. And hey, 10 people a day is 7 days a week, I guess you would want to say. What does that mean? Like, is it 7 days a week? Is it 5 days a week? That's what we get into. We talked about tracking numbers and everything, Eddie. So what do you think?
No, I think there's also value in just getting started. I think it's important to understand. I think for anybody who's getting started on that journey or looking to recommit and really sharpen the skills, to your point, is just doing and knowing and being comfortable with that you're not the best at it on day 1 or even day 10 or day 20 or 50, because again, you can always improve. I think being able to shed that fear, and again, these are back to the real basics, right? I use the word fear because that's a lot of reasons why we do or don't do things. That being able to shed that by way of practicing, even if you're not great at it, is the step, is what you need to do to get to that mastery level. And this also just ties in real well. And I don't want to necessarily skew where your reply may be on this, but focusing on one domain and being able to be very masterful at it. Like you can do really, really well if all you did was an animal on the phones all day, every day. And that was your prospecting vehicle and your way of becoming very successful. I think you and I could rattle off a bunch of names, maybe even including ourselves, in terms of how we got to where we got by way of becoming very proficient on the phones and having that conversation. Everything from what do you say right away to how do you handle objections? How do you get to, getting them to commit to at least an appointment if it's your first call? All of those things are individual training sessions, if you will, to improve your standing and your phone call ability.
Yeah. Yeah. So the simplicity of it is there is a simplicity, and there's I think there's massive truth in it. But it's like you just can't take, as an example, I offered to the team, so I do a lot of, one of my favorite philosophies out there is Stoicism, right? And so I made a suggestion to the team for some people to read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And one of the agents, she sent back to me that she's like, she read a passage and it said, and look, meditation, this is why it's like, I was like, you got to look at it, you don't have to do anything, but look at it in the context of Meditations was not written as a book. It was a journal. So think about your journal. I don't know if you've journaled before. I'm sure you have. Like, they're your kind of thoughts about things. And it's like, what's going on inside of your head? And contextually, it's hard to we're trying to figure out what's going on inside our own head by journaling, right? And sometimes we'll say things that I've said things in my journals I know that may be contradictory that I said 3 years ago to what I'm doing now. So anyways, the passage in there was, and I'm going to paraphrase it poorly, but it was like, don't pine over books, right? To that fact, like, very paraphrased really poorly. Marcus, I'm sure, read it much more eloquently than what I just said. But the point is, she took it as Marcus is against education. And I'm like, you could literally look at it that way, or you could, this kind of gets into empathy and I wouldn't say critical thinking, but at least kind of going, what was he really saying there? Was it a literal thing? For me, what it was Marcus was like, hey, reading is great, but if you just sit in a room constantly and just read and don't go out and experience the world and apply the things that you've learned, you're kind of missing the bigger picture, right? So if you just took the passage as a literal thing, you could say, well, Marcus didn't believe in education. Why would he not believe in education? He's over here. It's like, no, Marcus read a lot. Marcus was a very educated person. But he was saying to himself, hey, go out and experience life. That's what it meant to me. So does that make kind of sense?
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about experience, and my brain goes to applying what you learned, like put it into practice. Like, I just read a book on how to, dig this hole. Well, you got to grab the shovel and start digging the hole. So you realize what it takes. Not only go through the motions of what was shown to you or told to you or that you read, but actually feeling it. And then also feeling the challenges of that. Boy, digging this hole is work. I didn't realize it was going to be, I just figured like, dig a hole and be done. And I'd be back in the house in the air conditioning. No, yeah. All of a sudden you hit 3 inches down, you hit all kinds of rocks. Now you got to rethink or adjust, right? And so I think being able to do that too, I think that's probably some of the walls that exist when you're starting on this journey of learning. So it's one thing to say, I'm going to learn how to prospect, I'm going to learn how to make phone calls, but then the minute you hit that rock in that conversation, how am I pivoting? How am I then able to continue that conversation and not be stopped completely in my tracks? That is that journey of continuing to educate yourself, and that's why it's so valuable. I saw this is kind of hits exactly what we're talking about right now. I was engaging in conversation online with somebody, and their question was, and obviously probably a newer agent, what is the best brokerage out there that I should start for a brand new agent? I'm like, whoa. That's a huge, huge question. Reel that back, because there is no black and white answer. And of course, a lot of people were chiming in with, go here, go there. This is the best one. That's the worst one. I got all these things over here. And you know how it is, right? And so everyone's waving their magic signs to try to get your attention. I said, no, stop. I said, before you pick a name, meet with the leadership, because the leadership is different everywhere you go, even under the same umbrella. And after you've determined how and what you need to learn, how do you learn? What do you need? Because that's the differentiation between you being successful and not. Because just because it's a great looking flag or the biggest brokerage in town does not mean that you and the leadership and the way they teach and the way you learn, more importantly, is going to gel. And so, I love the culture that you've built inside the Alex 8 group, because it's one of teaching. And I was just on the call the other day with one of your team members, and she was incredibly forthcoming with a very personal journey. So when you get back to journaling and kind of putting your thoughts down, the ability not only to get that down, figure out how it is you're going to overcome whatever it is you need to overcome, to take advantage of the training that's available to you, to make the calls, to supersede, to win, and to become the agent you say you want to be.
Yeah. I love that you got into that, man. The brokerages, I think they matter in certain ways. The functionality and that kind of stuff, I think, is important to be able to, get your DAs done and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, that's important. But I love what you said there. Leadership is one thing. Like, we actually met with somebody the other day. I can't get too in depth with it, but, I got to be careful. Kind of circling back around, leadership is who you're aligning with, right? So there's the leadership at the top. Like, what does that look like? What is that person's vision, the CEO and so forth? I think that's important, because before I joined EXP, I actually told this story to the person. I said, look, I looked at Glenn Sanford and was like, what's this guy all about? Because the EXP was a newer concept, right? And it was, and I didn't even understand about this stuff, but I wanted to do a little bit more research about like a punk company going public, right? And so as I dug in a little bit more through YouTube and learned more about Glenn had he'd done a lot of different stuff, but one of the foundational pieces that he had done was actually bringing companies public. He actually helped corporations that were private go public, right? So, and he in the interviews that I watched, he was like, I'd get in front of some of these CEOs of private companies, and they said, I want to go public. I want to go public. I want to go public. And he would say, okay, let me look at your company. And so Glenn's like, understanding EBITDA and projections and debt and all that kind of stuff of like, what is going to be going from a private company to a public company. And he would say, and I remember one of the interviews, he would say to some of these CEOs, these owners, like, you got to get this stuff, like, it's working for you in a private manner, but if you bring this thing public and you don't have these things squared away when you make that transition, you're going to get ripped apart by the VCs. They're going to short your company. They're going to see the flaws. They're going to see the holes. They're going to exploit them. They're going to short your stock. Like, this stuff that I wouldn't even like go, and I still don't fully understand it, but I could understand conceptually, like, this guy had the pedigree, right? He had the experience to bring a company public and have it go public for a long time. And he would say to some of these guys, he's like, I would say to some of them, like, I can do it for you. You can pay $200,000. We can bring you public, but you're going to get ripped apart. And, what I see, and I don't, like, I'll do it. If you want to pay me the money, it's up to you. I'm not going to get, paid one way or the other. Whether, once you go public, I'm going to get paid, but then you're going to get ripped apart. Now, if I can help you say, hey, you need to do this, this, and this. So in the long term, you're going to be a viably public company. And he said some of them wouldn't take his advice and just I want to go public. And that was ego, right? Like, I just want to see my company's name on the stock exchange and I can feel good about I'm public. And it's like, okay, great. And then you've just lost your company because of your ego. So I think that's important from that side, that bigger side. And EXP has got no debt and, profitable and all that kind of stuff. But then it's like, okay, you're not going to have Glenn Sanford as your sponsor. So now let's look at who your sponsor is going to be. What do you need? What do you see your path as? And then aligning with that person. Like, for instance, you and I, Eddie, right? Somebody wants to learn about video. They want to get their phone skills up. They want to grow a team. It's like, well, I can help you grow a team. I've done that. Eddie can help you. You want to learn about Instagram. I mean, gosh, Eddie, you just got, I was telling this guy the other day, I'm like, man, Eddie just got this like gig with this amazing company. Can I mention the company?
Not quite yet.
Okay, cool. I'm glad I held off on that. So, but anyhow, like, it's pretty cool, man. Like, you went out and you did your stuff. You weren't even really looking for it. And these people approached you. That was an attraction-based marketing thing, which putting out content about this home community or this or that, right? Like, that's YouTube, it's Instagram, Facebook. Which medium do you want to use? You understand that stuff at a really high level, so you can help somebody out there that says, hey, I see Alex doing this stuff, or I see this other guy in my town doing this stuff. I don't really know how to do it. It's like, well, Eddie can help you do that. So align, give us a shout if that's something that's interesting to you, either growing a team or doing content marketing, which I do as well. Have gotten listings and sales from YouTube, and then I do a newsletter, put it into the newsletter, all this kind of stuff. Like, hey, we can help you do this. So that's the alignment, and that's like, I hope that you look at us as a potential leader to align with, because we can help you get there. And so we're leading, but we're also your partner too. We're not your boss. That, I know it was a long story, but hopefully the analogy landed.
So long story short, being able to identify somebody that is a right fit for your company as a broker, as a leader, but also then understanding, that they necessarily will not thrive where you are and that they should be better suited somewhere else, and try to give them that leg up in terms of, where you are right now in your career or where your skill set is. You may be a better fit over here, and being able to, over here and being able to direct somebody like that is also something I took pride in, as a leader as well. But, for the ones that are, what are the terms you use? Ready, hungry, humble, and coachable?
Hungry, humble, coachable.
And coachable. When you're able to identify that as a leader and say, yeah, you'll really thrive if you come into this ecosystem, I think that's wonderful. That matchmaking part, and that's the whole point of me bringing that up in terms of, that comment that I shared with them, is it's so important to matchmake there as well. Just like we matchmake with buyers and sellers to help them buy and sell a home, or it's the same thing. It's being of service to try to, as leaders in our community and our industry, be able to point someone in the right direction, nudge them in the right direction, based on us being able to use all of our expertise and our experience in helping them probably make a much better decision.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I think it's so important. And I'll mention something else here, because we get real raw in here, man. Like, be careful. So the humility, because the ego can be so like, oh man, it can really get you. And from the standpoint of, if somebody's really kind of telling you what you want to hear, and what I mean by that is like, I think that certain people want, like this. I love what you mentioned earlier between like simple and easy. I was talking with Carlos yesterday, and we were talking about, someone that we're considering partnering with and so forth. And he's like, if you're not hungry, nothing's going to be really easy or simple, I guess. There's a path, and that's the coachable part of like, hey, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. And that's the thing, man. It's like, I just think a lot of people, some people, and myself included, I've fallen into this trap of like, oh, if I just do this, then all this stuff, if I join this company, because I've had people join EXP before that thought, oh, I'm just going to join, and then I'm going to get this big network, and they're going to blow up my project, because I've had these before, that weren't really into selling real estate, but they wanted to leverage EXP to push their agenda or their platform. And it's like, you've got to really add value to the community to be able, it's like Carlos says, like, you got to make a lot of deposits before you ask for withdrawals, right? So you got to build these relationships and support these people that are in this community. You don't just join and then all of a sudden you get the leverage of this whole community. No, you've got to make deposits. And look, this is a real estate company, and there's people that have leveraged for coaching and have done that, but they've added value to the community. They've added value to the brokerage. And so it's not a quick fix of like, I want to be on stage and I want to be, selling my coaching program or this or that. Like, I don't think there's any company out there that's like, when you join, like, yeah, we're going to put you up on stage and we're going to get you in front of all these people and you're going to be able to now have a giant coaching program because you joined us. I just don't think that exists personally. I think it can exist. I think it can be earned. I think it can be created through the community, but it's just not like, okay, I joined this company. They've got a great value proposition, and all of a sudden they tell me what I want to hear, and all of a sudden I'm going to blow up my coaching program or my philanthropic program or organization. Just kind of doesn't work like that.
But if we bring it back to the average agent that's trying to just get started, is there here's where I define the simple versus easy. So it's simple in terms of what you need to do, but it's not easy to do it and do it consistently. Right? And here's where I use the word simple. It's simple in that it's not a complicated concept or list of tasks that must be done. It's not. Let's just use the word call. I have to call, meet, shake hands with, talk to, in whatever form, X amount of people to reach the goal that I have of closing X amount of deals. So that's where I always like to start to really kind of simplify. And I think that's the simple part. What is not easy about that simple plan or simple framework is that you have to do it consistently. You cannot fail at it. That's where people fall off, in my opinion, in my experience, because you get it. I'm walking in, I'm a brand new agent. You sit in front of Alex, and Alex tells you got to make these calls. This is the goals you've set for yourself. This is the plan. Making these calls is a part of that. Meeting with us on a regular basis is a part of that, whatever it is. But the plan is probably only a handful of steps that most people can just say, oh, I see that. I get that. That is a simple plan. And if you tell me if I follow this plan, I can get to X, Y, and Z. Yes. And it is true. I'm not selling you a bag of garbage or BS. It's true. And so, but the hard part is, what time did you get up the next morning? Did you have a good breakfast? Did you work out? Did you, wake up with the right mindset? Have you been able to handle all the other challenges that come with you on your life journey? Everything outside of work. How are your relationships? How are all those things working? Did you make then the 10 calls? Did you shake the 10 hands? Did you send the 10 emails? Did you send the 10 texts that are part of this very simple plan, which you nodded your head to and said, yeah, I get that. And did you do it the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day without fail? Without fail. That is what's not easy. And that is why we have the very few percentage of agents that are successful or even doing one single transaction per year in 2024.
You nailed it. That's 100% right, man. I'll add this too. Did you do that? And then look, like right now on Thursdays, we have in our role play room where we actually listen, because we record calls, and we actually play these recordings for the whole room. and people give feedback on, hey, you could have said this a little bit, but I like what you said here. And they get, hey, I liked what you said there.
So
Right. And they're writing it down. Yeah, they're writing it down. And oh, that's a good thing to say there. That's what you say there. So they're assimilating through your experience skill and little nuggets, right? Like, okay, they pivoted here. They kind of said this here. They tweaked maybe even their cadence a little bit here. So it's that too, right? It's making the calls, but then it's also either A, listening to your calls, or B, come into our room and role play and have somebody else go, hey, I kind of like what you said here, but you kind of trailed off here. You talked too much there. So that you get that feedback. And that's another part of, that's the humble, like hungry, got to do it. Humble is I can get better. And coachable is I'm writing it down. And then when I go and make those calls today, oh, there's that little piece that I learned today, that I took the coaching. I was humble enough to say, hey, like, they weren't criticizing me. They were actually kind of just giving me feedback for me to help to grow my skills. That's why we just still think those hungry, humble, coachable. Yeah, the simple plan is there, but it's also like, it's not just the literal, hey, just make the 10 calls. Like we started this whole thing off with I just made this 10 calls. And why didn't it work? Well, because, you didn't say this, you didn't do that, you did, and you never looked at what you did, and you're like, it didn't work. It's like, your skills aren't that good. So you got to get a little humble and say like, oh man, okay, I'm going to get out there and get uncomfortable and have people give me some feedback. And then you'll get comfortable with feedback. Then you'll get comfortable with, oh, okay, like I'm not maybe as good as I thought I was. Or also like, maybe I took this just too literally, that if I just make these 10 calls, it's going to solve all my problems. No. So that's why I think the humility in there and the willingness, every time I'm on a call with Carlos, man, I'm like, I've got my notes right here in front of me here today, page and a half of notes from a 20-minute conversation with Carlos yesterday of like, yeah, man, we kind of missed that. We kind of missed that. Did we ask? No, we didn't ask that. So he's asking, did you ask this? Did you ask this? No, we did. And remember when I did this with you, Alex, when he sat with me for the first time and he's like, this kind of stuff was going on here that you didn't really even realize. And I'm like, oh man, he's so masterful. And not that he was manipulating it all. He's just trying to align with me. He's trying to like, anytime he's like, he could sense where I was giving a little bit of pushback because he wanted to put me on the phone with Jay Kinder. And I was like, I don't want to get closed. And he's like, okay, man. So he wasn't like, no, let me put Jay on the phone with you. Like, no, he's like, okay, cool. So then he's back in alignment because he's not pushing. He's not trying to sell me. He's just continuing to build rapport. We felt a resistance point and he went water around a rock. And then something else came up and he's like, man, I kind of don't know the answer to that question, but I think Jay would. So he came at it from another way. And I was like, okay, because I trusted because he didn't push over here. And he's like, but he came at it from a different direction. And then I remembered getting on the phone with Jay and I wasn't as scared and I didn't feel like I was getting sold. And Jay also came on and he was just like, how can I help? He wasn't like, oh yeah, you should do this, you should do that. Like, this is better. He's like, how can I help? Okay, yeah, here's the answer to this question. And then boom, he was off the phone. And it was like, I moved through with a little bit of that fear of being sold. Jay was just so legitimately caring about helping me, period. So
I love, there's a couple of things there that I picked up on that you said that I really like is I think that intersection or that movement from humble to coachable, that self-awareness, that ability to be open, I really think that's a superpower. I just really do. I think it's a superpower in anything you do. Just like to shut up and listen and grab a pen and paper and genuinely take notes. Because I love how you and your team do that, because that means that everyone is there with the same mindset, ready to absorb. And even if it's a minor thing, it's that constant improvement, right? And we've said this, we know this. It's that it all stacks on top of each other. So now you combine, I'm good at following this simple plan that I was given on day one. Here I'm still staring at it and I know what I need to do. It's simple. And I'm making it easier for myself to implement that plan by constantly improving the stuff I didn't know, or now I can tweak, now I can do differently. Um, I mean, that's it. And then I love about kind of where Jay is at, right? I do a lot of that myself in terms of helping others learn video marketing strategies, is because I enjoy it. I mean, I have the studio that I didn't need to open, but I have a whole separate studio just to hone my craft, right? And once I hone my craft, once you hone your craft, one of the things that I see leaders do time and time again is they're willing to, like Jay, open up his time, meet with you, and genuinely share. And there may not be any immediate benefit to him doing that. But I think at the end of the day, I think when we are leaders of that kind, we sleep really well at night because we're leaving all this good stuff behind, right? So from a bigger perspective, that's kind of how I move through the world, is like, I can't take any of this with me. And if it can help you in this instance, in a business context, make a few extra bucks or improve your business, take a chair, scoot right up. Let me tell you what I know. And that's the culture that I love that exists inside the Alex A Group.
Yeah. Thank you, Eddie. And I think that's a big reason why we're aligned. I want to make an analogy, or I want to make a statement and then an analogy. One of the things, these beautiful lessons that just keep coming through, which is the reason I joined, was that I wanted to be around people that, were doing bigger things and that kind of thing. The concept of servant leadership, that it's not the leader. I think a lot of people think the leader is up on, and there's leadership that's on stage for sure, and there's leadership of generals behind the line, but they were in a war before. Usually the leaders that are generals, like they were actually on the front line at one point, other than potentially some of the West Point guys or whatever, the officers and so forth, but they had to cut their teeth too. So I guess that servant leadership is a big thing, which I've learned. And I want to give this analogy of like golf. So I love golf, right? So I've been playing golf with these guys and they're a group of old pros. And some of them were club pros and some of them played on tour. They all like cut their teeth and they've hit a lot of balls and they've learned the game. And some of them learned it in the dirt, which is the kind of Ben Hogan of just like figured it out. I was telling one of the new agents the other day, and I said, "Hey, you a golfer?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "What are your handicap?" And he goes, "I'm pretty good." I said, "Well, what's your handicap?" He goes, "I'm a 4." I was like, "Ooh, that's," if anybody out there doesn't know, like to get to single digits is tough. And he's like, "What do you?" It's kind of like, "What do you bench?" And I was like, "I'm a 4.8." But I never, I learned more from like my grandfather, and I read a lot and I watched a lot, and this kind of bleeds into what my analogy is here. So I started playing with these pros over 10 years ago, right? Actually, right around my daughter was born, so almost 14 years ago. And, they've told me, they're like, you are the most improved. And my handicap has gone down probably, I think I was like an 11 or a 12 when I started with them. And to get down to a 4.8 without taking, crazy amounts of lessons or whatever, like simply by playing with them and watching them and listening to them, and like, they're like, you're most improved type deal. And there's other guys that have been playing with them for the same amount of time that are they shoot the same scores because these guys just keep doing it the way that they want to do it, and they're not getting any better. And so this isn't a testament to me or whatever, but it's just, it's the proof's in the pudding. Like my handicap has gone down. I haven't gone out and go to David Ledbetter's academy and grinded it out and hit a bunch of balls. I've definitely hit more balls and all that, but it's just simply by being humble and going the way I'm doing it, which golf is a really interesting thing because it's a game of opposites. Like the ego speaks in opposites, is that you get habits, and those habits, whether it's smoking or drinking or making calls a certain way or showing property a certain way or whatever, you get into habits and they're comfortable. Even though they may not be serving you, they're comfortable. Now, when you change something in golf, at first it feels really uncomfortable. Like I'm working on something still, man, with my grip. I had a weak grip, which caused a certain type of ball flight, and I didn't get a lot of distance. I could manage it and I could get around, but I wasn't going to get any better, and I wasn't going to hit the ball any farther, right? So by watching these guys, listening to these guys, being around these guys, being humble, like, hey, how do you do that? How do you do that? And he's like, hey, change your hand here, change your alignment here, change your hips here. And I do it, and I'm like, oh, that feels like super uncomfortable, man. Like, oh, I don't like that. It's like, yeah, because you're so used to doing it this way. So when you change, it sucks. It's hard. It's uncomfortable, but it's like I know I'm getting better, and then my scores have come down. So I know that's a long story, but it's a personal story, and it's the truth. So
No,
hopefully that helps.
that's a wonderful analogy to kind of end this and put a bow on the concept, because there is you brought in this element of being hungry, humble, and coachable is one thing, but what we alluded to earlier is there's a little bit of that pain, and however you define pain, and having to readjust, especially if we're older, right? Have to readjust and break through some of those old habits that were super comfortable, because your butt made that couch cushion just the right shape after all these years. And now your wife says you got to go get a new couch, and you get the new couch, and it's like, I can't get comfortable. I want my old couch back. And that is super tough to get over. But I mean, you're a testament that was a perfect example, a perfect analogy of how you have to go through that. Yet another challenge of not only being steadfast in the plan, seeing the relatively clear and easy plan, and not only staying the course, but as I was mentioning earlier, when you're trying to dig that hole and you hit those rocks, you got to figure it out, and you've got to work through digging through that so that you can get to the other side, because that's what you committed to. Just like we've committed to bringing this kind of hopefully thoughtful insight to all of you watching on the Relevant Agent Pod. And as always, my friend, thank you so much for the conversation. I'm sure it's going to help one person. If it does that, we won.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Eddie. Have a good day, bud.
See you on the next one.